All right, everybody. So this is our first step mentorship podcast. So we have a bunch of questions that were submitted by students anonymously, and we're going to be going through a few of them. So first, I just want to introduce our guests. We have Faizan Habibi, Hassan Shihata, Rafiq Kidwai, and Khalid Rwan. Did you guys want to say something about yourselves?
Okay, so my name is Faizan Habibi. I'm a third-year student at Western University, currently pursuing a dual degree with Health Sciences and IB's Business. I'm not entirely sure what I want to do in terms of profession-wise, but hopefully it lies somewhere in the field of either consulting or finance or something along those lines.
Yeah, so my name is Hassan, and I'm a third-year student at the Schulich School of Business at York University. I'm just trying to go to law school at this point, so I'm just focused on that.
Hey guys, my name is Rafiq. I'm a third-year student at the University of Toronto, Mississauga, and I'm doing a double major in biology for health sciences and chemistry, and my career goal is to get into medical school.
Hey folks, my name is Khalid, second-year computer engineering student at the University of Waterloo. Career aspirations would hopefully be architecture developer on mobile applications or technical product manager.
So thank you guys for coming. Really appreciate it. And so I'm Amin. I'm a third year at McMaster University studying health sciences, and I also aspire to become a medical professional. So first of all, thank you for answering our form and sending us all the questions. We really appreciate it. And so without further ado, we will get started. So we got a lot of questions about people asking how to choose specific programs for university. So we wanted to just open the floor up and ask you guys, how did you come up with your programs, or how did you choose your programs in the end?
Honestly, I think a lot of kids expect themselves to know what they want to do by high school. But in my experience, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like a lot of kids generally don't really have an idea of what they want to do specifically. They just have an idea of like a field that entertains them, you know? So like, I like computers, so I'm going to go into something related to tech. But like, nobody really thinks like, oh, I want to be this specific kind of software developer, and so I need this specific sort of degree. And so the influence on your decision will probably be like your friends, your family, people who've taken a program. They're like, oh, this is really interesting, this is really dope. I know I had a lot of friends who were doing computer engineering initially, and they told me like about the program and how it's a bit of hardware, it's a bit of software, and best of both worlds type of thing. And so I picked that because I knew I wanted to do something related to tech. So that was sort of the influence. And I think the other thing that will also influence your decisions is like your interests. So I don't really have like a particular interest in economics or business, so I knew I didn't want to go into the business field. Same with biology and chemistry, so I knew medicine wasn't the thing for me. And so like process of elimination, you just sort of end up choosing like, okay, engineering. That's how it worked for me, at least.
Yeah, pretty similar with me as well, like process of elimination. You just see what you don't like and what you like. I think I recommend to be really open-minded. Like I personally applied to 10 programs and only 2 of them were business. And they were kind of like additions I kind of put in kind of last second. Because like when you're in grade 12, you don't really have a great idea of what careers are like and stuff like that. So try to be as open-minded as possible and just apply to programs you really think you're interested in.
Yeah, I agree with the whole open-minded thing. That's kind of why I ended up going my route, because with IB, it technically starts in third year. And so for me, it was if I really liked the health sciences that I did in the first 2 years, I could just opt into that and continue down that route. Or in third year, I could just kind of walk into that route and I wouldn't have to repeat any years, which was sort of a blessing in disguise. And another thing I did when I was choosing programs was I compared different programs. So for business, I would look at for me, the end goal was getting a job. And so I'd look at the employment reports of all the different schools I was considering. So like Queens, Schulich, Ivy, whatever. And they all kind of target, because all of them are target schools. And so they're target schools for specific things. So I knew that I wasn't really interested in accounting. So I wasn't going to go to a particular school that was focused in accounting. So something I did was compare different schools and see what they specialize in. And then that was a big factor in my decision as well.
Yeah. Well, other thing, like for me, is honestly marks. Marks are an influence on like this sort of programs you can pick. Initially, when my marks weren't like all too great, I had picked like a less competitive program, for example, than computer engineering. And then like I had siblings and friends who were like, oh, based on your marks, here are the available programs that you can kind of like. So initially I was going to do management engineering actually. And then all my friends were like, yo.
No shade.
Yeah, no, absolutely no shade. And then my friends were like, you should think to get a computer engineering, and it motivated me like to get a higher average. So marks play an influence. Like you have to be realistic with yourself. You can't have like an 81 and think like, oh, I want to go into software at Waterloo. Like that's not going to happen. You can still do software, but the school might not be the same.
Yeah.
So that's the thing.
Yeah, I think there are definitely a lot of factors you have to consider. Besides the marks and your interest, I feel like for me personally, like it was the commute time, right? Am I going to live on residence? Am I going to stay at home? A lot of things was tuition cost, like how much scholarship are you getting from different universities?
Right.
That plays a huge role down the line in your 4 years, especially with student loans, and how that can affect like how you're going to spend your money when you actually get a job. So that's definitely something you have to consider.
Honestly, yeah, school never told us about any of that stuff, like the whole application process for scholarships or considering tuition. Moving was a big thing because I've never lived alone prior to uni. My parents were very opposed to Waterloo just based on the fact that I had to live alone. So it took like a lot of convincing.
I agree with all of your points. I would say when I was picking programs, I was still on the fence between engineering and like a more biology route, right? Medicine, something like that. What helped me a lot was talking to different people. So professionals in the field or people who are in those programs. And like Khalid said, people don't necessarily have a good idea of what the actual career is like. They have ideas of what they're interested in, and they can kind of link that to what they think the program is going to be about. But getting that insight, talking to people, really understanding what the programmer field is about, I think was very beneficial to my decision-making process.
Yeah, one thing I want to add too, just because you have like a particular passion or an interest, that doesn't mean that has to be your field. This is a very straw man example, but like just because you like photography, for example, that doesn't mean your field should be photography. But try to see what are the things about photography that make you like it, like the freedom to express your emotions or the freedom to create art, for example, and try to link that into other programs. For example, I like problem solving a lot, and there's a lot of programs that give you technical challenges, and it just so happens that computer engineering helps you manifest those passions in a specific way. So don't be closed-minded, like be open-minded. I made the mistake of applying only computer engineering in all 6 of my applications, and then 2 comp sci or 1 comp sci. So yeah, that was in regret, a hindsight, but in hindsight, I regret, but whatever, it is what it is.
So what would you guys tell, or what advice would you guys give to a student who's not sure what they want to do at the end of high school? So they've looked at different programs, they've probably talked to a few people, but they're still a bit confused, or they're not exactly sure what their goal is.
It's always good to ask others for advice, right? So you get a better idea of what your options are and if they're good or not. And ultimately, it is your own decision. But yeah, your parents are going to have a very big influence on your decision, of course.
For sure.
And I think it's good to ask your parents. I think it's always good to receive input.
Oh, 100%, yeah.
Yeah, I know when I made my decision, my parents were a huge influence.
And something I noticed too, like once you actually go to university is like just because you go to a particular program doesn't mean you're stuck in a particular career. Like you have a lot of flexibility. If you play your cards right, you can still end up where you kind of want to go. You're not just stuck there if you go to a particular program but you want to pursue a particular career.
Like there's more than one way to get there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I just want to say that 2 things. One, to keep in mind that if you go into a particular program, you are not necessarily like married to that program or that field. You can always switch out or kind of navigate your way into a different field even through that. And secondly, it's totally okay to not know where you want to go. Even myself, like coming into 3rd year, I really didn't know what I wanted to do, and I kept my options open still. And everyone around me either really knew what they wanted to do or they were pretending to know what they wanted to do. No, honestly,
that's a good point.
That's honestly facts, because in Ivy, recruiting season for the next summer internship starts in September. So everyone's running around. Some people have interviews. Some people already have jobs coming in from previously. And you kind of get this identity crisis where you're like, okay, half my class is going to investment banking and the other half is doing consulting. I don't even know what these words mean. And that's okay, because in reality, half the class doesn't know what those words mean. It's just that you're just going with the flow. And so it's okay to not know what you want to do. But with that being said, I think it's important that you nudge yourself in a particular direction and then figure it out from there. So just because you don't know what you want to do doesn't mean you just not apply to anything or not go into anything. Maybe, like in my case, maybe investment banking doesn't interest me. Maybe I'll try consulting, and through that trial, I'll see, okay, I don't like it or I really do like it. So it's okay to not know, but definitely do put yourself out there and, enter some sort of door, for lack of a better term, instead of just evaluating your options forever.
Right. So I'm hearing a lot of use your judgment and do get advice for some certain people, but obviously, keep in mind certain biases they could have. And you guys were talking about how that even if you do go into a specific program, you don't have to stick to that. You can change, and a lot of people, actually don't know. What would you guys think of taking a gap year or taking a year off after high school? What do you guys think of that?
Yeah, so I was going to say that all the things you guys brought up is pointing towards making a well-informed decision.
Yes.
How important that is, and doing it by asking advice from your mentors and other people in your family or your friends, and then tying it back to taking a gap year. I think a lot of people put this huge importance behind not wasting any time, because you want to quickly graduate, get a degree, get a job, so you can start working and live your life. But then also, it's always good to take a step back and try to it's okay to take a gap year, is what I'm trying to say. And I think it's okay to take some time off and see where you are financially, or how you're going to like the lifestyle of a job you may take in a gap year, or maybe just save up, right, for tuition. Gap years can be very essential.
I think to add on to that, it's, at least in my mind, it was like you take a gap year after grade 12, but you can also go into a program and after a year, you can take a gap year and do like an extended co-op or start working or whatever to really think about what you want to do. So don't think of a gap year as after high school. You can also do it when you're in university if you want to either save up for tuition or start working to gain some hands-on experience, or just trying to reevaluate your options. So don't restrict your gap year to just after grade 12.
I think adding on to Rafi's point though, make sure the gap year decision is an informed decision, because especially if it's in the middle of school, breaking that momentum between studying and whatnot and then not studying can be pretty detrimental in the long run if you aren't doing it for the right reasons. So make sure it's informed, actually make sure you have a purpose.
Yeah, I think another thing is you want to stay productive if you do take a year off. Giving yourself time to relax is obviously a good thing, but a year is a long time.
Yeah, a year is a long time.
So people, like Faizan said, people that take a year off during school often will work or do a co-op or something. If it's going to help their tuition or help them gain more experience, that's something to look into. If it's after grade 12, you could use that time to. You could work, but you could also use that time to do some shadowing. Maybe get some more exposure in different fields, so you can make a better decision in terms of where you want to go afterwards.
You could actually take some college courses too.
That's true.
Take some, night school, college or whatever. So it balances with your schedule. And then you take a couple courses in there so that when you do go to first year university, if you decide to go to university, it's easier. And you also know what you kind of want to do because you spent a year taking different courses, trying different things. So a gap year is fine as long as you're doing it for the right reasons.
It could also help you improve your high school average.
Yeah, that's a great point.
You could retake some courses, and then I think a lot of programs just take the higher of whichever one you have. So you can honestly be productive in a lot of ways.
Yeah, we touched upon this a little bit as well. But what would you guys say to a person who, after they're already into a program, they realize that they're either not good at it, or they're not as passionate as they thought they were, and they're thinking of switching, or they're considering their options at this point?
Well, you have to, at least for me, and a lot of kids in engineering, this is a very common thing, feeling like you don't want to do this anymore because the technical aspect of the field is very different than the academic aspect, and I'm sure this applies to all your programs as well. And so a lot of kids get in there thinking man, why am I even studying this? So ask yourself what it is about the program that you really don't like. If it's something you genuinely are disinterested in, you wake up every day and you're like, man, I don't want to study this, period, then switch out if it's actually impacting your health, impacting your grades, impacting your passion for the field. But if you're just lazy like myself and you're I just want an easier program, quote unquote, then you also have to be realistic with yourself and ask yourself why you feel in this way about the field. So it's okay to switch out. Make sure you have the marks to switch out. Don't make the mistake I did. I wanted to switch out, but my marks weren't good enough to actually switch out. So I'm stuck in engineering. Literally, I'm stuck in engineering. But it's okay. So understand why you want to switch out. And if you are going to, make sure to do your research again so you don't repeat the same mistake. You don't want to waste more time. And make sure it's
I think you brought up some very important things, especially taking care of your own health. Yeah. Seeing how your mental health is, how you're having stress. But I feel also whenever making such it's a big decision to make when you're switching programs, I think it's important to try to identify the problem, as in what's causing you to do bad in the program, for example. Is it something very simple as in your work ethic could be improved, right? Or is there something that's more related to your passion and what your interests are? Because I feel like if you confuse the two, you can end up making a decision that's not going to be good for you in the future.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think like I'm sure you have a pretty like high or heavy workload. So sometimes you might feel like, oh, like you're grinding too hard for too long. And so you, like, to your point, Rafe, it's like, am I just tired of like working really hard for a long period of time, or is this particular field just not for me anymore?
Yeah, and if you kind of realize towards the end of your degree too, like when you're like, okay, now I have to graduate and get a job, you're like, I don't really like what I see. You could always go for a graduate program,
That's true.
in a field you're also more interested in. It's obviously a big decision because, more tuition, more time, but if you're really set on a different career or a different path, sometimes going to a graduate program does help with that.
Two things I want to add on to that, actually. A lot of people, when they graduate from a program, they don't work in that program, like that they graduated from.
Exactly.
So it's okay. Like sometimes a degree is just that. Like it's a degree as a backup option. Like your degree could be your backup, you know? Like I know a lot of guys in software who do software but don't have like a software degree or an engineering degree. They have like a business degree, So it's okay to be in a degree that you don't want to work in, as long as it's not like impacting your health, impacting your mental well-being and whatnot. And they just get it as a backup option. And the other thing is, you also have to be realistic with yourself. Sometimes, and I know this is what parents are gonna say, so like excuse me for saying it. Sometimes like something can be good for you in the long run, in the big picture, but you just don't know it. You have to be realistic with yourself. Think about your career aspirations. Think about like financing and whatnot. Make sure you're making the best decision for you, not for your parents, not for like friends and whatnot. So it's okay to switch out, but it's also okay to do something that you don't necessarily like today in the hope that it will pay off like 5 years down the road.
Yeah.
The sacrifice. It's all about informed decisions. Again, as Rafi said.
If you do want to switch out, it would be best to keep your courses that you're taking within, whether it be your spares or like whatever prerequisites you have, like general and open-minded. So even if you're applying to purely engineering, still take bio, because you never know. Maybe you want to switch out into something more science related. So actually, one of my friends, he did 2 years in computer science, and he switched out, and now he's in nursing. Complete shift, like not even the same program. So he was able to do that because he had fulfilled the prerequisite courses from beforehand. So that's important. And secondly, before you make that decision, try out a few courses as part of your electives into that. So I'm sure he didn't just go from like taking purely Python to anatomy. I'm sure he did 1 or 2, whether it be online courses or in school. He took a few courses, spoke to people. So make sure you kind of dip your feet into it before you completely switch, because you could end up switching and then ended up not liking that or hating that more than your previous program. So it's important to do your own due diligence beforehand before making such a huge decision.
Speak to a counselor. Speak to a counselor on campus.
Yeah.
They'll give you some decent choices too, to look at your marks and where you can go and whatnot. That's a very important thing.
Yeah, I found also speaking to professors is very useful, because a lot of times they come from different fields. But I really do agree with the electives, in that if you're thinking about switching and maybe you're realizing that it's particularly your passion and not necessarily, the fact that you're tired of just working hard, take a course in something different, or take a course in whatever you're thinking that you're maybe more interested in. Get some exposure, right? Before you make that decision.
I just want to say it allows you to compare both of the things simultaneously. So it's not like you're taking one semester of like Python and then another semester of nursing. You're taking them like literally in the same week. So as you're studying, you can tell whether you enjoy studying one course more than the other or things like that. So yeah, it's important to take them like at the same time.
And I just want to say, like, switching programs isn't a downgrade, or like if you switch out of a program into something that's like less competitive, you're like, you messed up or whatever. But it's totally okay to realize this isn't for you and you want to do something else, as long as it's, again, informed and you're doing it for the right reasons.
Cool. So you guys noted that there's a lot of emphasis on marks and stuff like that in high school when picking programs, your interests and whatnot. But what would you guys say about external factors? So things like the program culture, the environment, the kinds of people that you could be interacting with. Any thoughts?
I think a big factor in why I chose my uni is because I had so many friends going there. Like I had 2 of my closest friends going to that program, and then a lot more there on campus, people I've known like for a long time. So that was something that like played a big role. If I had gone to like a university where I had no friends, I for sure wouldn't have enjoyed the program as much. So that's a factor. In terms of like toxic culture, I didn't really know much about the cultures. I think it's hard for a high schooler to know much about the culture in the program unless you know people who've been through the program. But like, yeah, just be confident in why you're going to that program, because sometimes like people in the program there might make you feel like insecure, like because they're a lot more smarter or whatever, and it's like so competitive. Trust yourself. Like that was also a big thing for me.
I mean, I would say, yeah, like, I think, like, sometimes we get to a point where we think too much about how we're picking programs and stuff like that. I think pick the program that fits your aspirations best. If, for instance, you have two programs that you really split between, then you could have stuff like culture and student body be the deciding factor after you've spoken to students in those programs. Like, don't depend on, like, Wyconic as a reference for that kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, like, that's not, like, 100% credible, you know? So, yeah, I would refer to students in those programs, but I think don't overthink things too much. Really just see whatever matches your aspirations most is what I personally recommend.
Yeah, I think culture is important. And to your point, Khalid, about friends, it's not, I don't think it's like a prerequisite to have friends that are going to your same program. You can always make friends there, which is pretty good. I would say, in my experience with I wouldn't say this is not like a toxic culture, it's just like a different culture. So Ivy has a very strong like partying and drinking culture, something that doesn't interest me too much. It appeals to like 95% of the student body there, so it works for them. The thing is, the reason I bring this up to Khalid's point is because those sort of activities that allow you to bond and participate with other people, they foster friendship, right? And so if you don't fit in with a particular type of group, then that will, at the end of the day, affect your ability to make friends. Your peers will remain the same, but your close friends and the people you have like a genuine connection with, that will be affected, right? So it's important that you have friends that you make through clubs and activities that you do. So whether it be sports or like other clubs or volunteering or whatever. But I don't recommend that you use the culture or the type of environment as your deciding factor. I think it's a factor, but I do think you should look at the end goal. So for me, like I still went to it because the opportunities available in terms of job prospects were very nice. Some of the MBA programs offered by them are really good. So those were the factors that I placed emphasis on. Yes, friendship and having friends and the culture is very important, but I don't recommend it be the ultimate deciding factor.
I think that this brings it to the point of like the influence of the environment around you. Like I personally believe that the environment that you're in will affect how your studying habits will be, ruin your grades. Right? And I've seen it happen at university with some of my friends as well, right? Mm-hmm. Like you can see them, you can see not coming to class anymore and stuff like that's happening. And that not only affects your grades, but that can also affect your mental health in the long run.
In my experience, culture wasn't something I considered too much. I think it's good to be able to adapt. And I do think that it's probably not the biggest factor. Again, it is a factor to consider, but it shouldn't be the deciding factor. One thing that I did find was something I looked into was the kind of work you would do in that program. My program has a lot of group work. So that was something that I asked about beforehand. And I think I'm very glad that I knew about that. Because it really changes how you interact with your peers, and it changes the dynamic of your studying, and just overall it affects your experience with that program and with the courses you're taking. So I think that is maybe something to look into. Again, I wouldn't say it's a very high priority factor to consider, but it's still something maybe to look into. All right, so shifting the focus a little bit now to adjusting from high school, because that seems to be a topic that people want to know about. And it definitely is something difficult, right? Everyone knows that first year is a bit of a transition year. So how would you describe your transition period? Was it difficult? Was it easy? Any tips?
It was terrible. Terrible. But again, the reason why it was terrible for me is because I realized as a high school student, I was able to get away with like a shitty work ethic. Then when your courses double in university and there's like more exams and more midterms, more assignments, that's when it really hits you. That's when the whole like, I'll do it the night before actually hurts your marks, really hurts your marks. So it was a terrible adjustment. And again, mind you, I had to live alone for the first time when I wasn't living with friends.
So you're saying you didn't get 95s in Eng?
No, not even close, man. So the 60 is the new 90, man. That's what it is. But yeah, look, if your work ethic is good in high school, chances are, not always, but chances are you will do well. You will do well, like you'll pass, if that's your definition of well. If you got away with studying the night before, you will suffer because you can't get away with that, especially when it comes to labs and you have to actually be in the lab to do the assignment. And time management, man.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
I think that's something we can all talk about.
Yeah, dude. Like I was used to like 3 courses and a spare.
Yeah.
And then it's like 5 courses.
Yeah.
Oh man. And all your midterms are like back to back to back. Like in the same week, and you can't even cry about the last one that you bodied because you have tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's terrible. It was terrible. I don't know. What do you guys think, man?
Yeah, I think so. Besides the fact that the content is a lot more, I think another factor to consider is your course schedule, right? Because instead of just having like 4 periods a day like you have in high school, now you have lectures, tutorials, labs, and they're not all in one day. They're all spaced out. So sometimes we'll have a class like 10 a.m. on Monday, and then we'll have a 6 p.m. class in the evening. So what are you going to do in the gap in between? Are you going to like sleep? Are you going to study? Are you going to just like waste your time? That makes a huge difference, and it ties back to the point about time management. So like use every chance you have to study or to plan your day.
Yeah.
I think planning makes a huge difference and on how well you'll perform in school, because it'll allow you to manage your time, and then you'll know, oh, I should do this first because my test is coming up for this course, and then I should do this homework and that and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
And it also helps build your work ethic, of course.
Yeah, 2 points Rafe brought up that I think were really, really important and are not stressed enough. So yeah, plan your day, plan your week. Please have a calendar if you don't have one already. I remember in first year I didn't have one, and everyone in second year told me, hey man, you should make a calendar, it would help you a lot. And I was like, nah, I'm okay. And it didn't go so well. So please make a calendar. It helps a lot. It helps you organize your day, week. It gives you an idea of when your assignments are due, your tests are due. So that's obviously very helpful in terms of, balancing your studying. And the second point was, do not underestimate your sleep. You need to sleep.
Oh, yeah.
And somehow, once you transition from high school to university, your ability to fall asleep, to get good sleep is diminished.
Yes.
It's incredible.
Dude, I used to be able to pull like all-nighters in high school.
Oh my God.
And go to a test without sleep and like do decent. Now I'm just getting bodied, man. A lot of sleep, man. It's
Yeah,
important.
like you think that, oh, if I sleep less, I study more, like it's gonna translate to better performance, but no, like you need that energy, you need to like be in that good state. So like more sleep usually means you do better, honestly. And something else Rafi mentioned was like with scheduling, like I was so naive when I was coming out of high school. I remember when I was making my schedule, I was like, oh, I don't like professors don't really matter. I'm just gonna study and like just do whatever. Like I don't care what professor I have. Professors do matter for some courses because some professors have different like course structures. Some are just like nicer, better teaching, better marketing schemes. So go on like Rate My Prof. There's a lot of ratings there for professors. You could look at that. And also like, unless you're engineering, but like try to avoid morning classes. Like those are horrible. Like especially if you commute, like if I go to York, I have to commute like an hour and a half or something. Try to avoid morning classes. I didn't think it was going to be a big deal, but those can be annoying. So.
Okay. So I didn't commute. I lived off campus. But I disagree, but maybe this is just because I work better in the morning. I do enjoy morning classes, and I like clustering my classes together in the morning just because you sort of have it done and out of the way. Obviously, sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes a course only offers one lecture, which is like 7 to 10 at night, right? That'll happen. But the reason I like to do that is because it kind of goes to achieving balance within your day and trying to help your performance. So one thing, I really liked my second year, and the reason was because I think I spent more time not studying and doing other things. And so this helped me because the time that I did allocate to studying was used more effectively. So in first year, I would go to classes and then I'd spend like 6 to 8 hours studying. And of those 6 to 8 hours, maybe 3 or 4 hours were productive. The other ones were like, read a slide, go on Instagram, whatever. And it really wasn't helping. And in second year, I got a bit more involved in, like, I really loved playing soccer. So even if I had a game the night before a midterm, I think like 3 out of 5 times I'd go and attend that game just because it felt like a good stress reliever for me, right? And I was able to do that because of what Rafi mentioned about time management, right? You schedule your time ahead of time. You make sure that you have everything done. Like obviously, if you don't know like an entire chapter, like don't go to that soccer game, right? But yeah, like make sure that you're doing other things that help improve your life and achieve balance as a whole, because all of that does play into your mental health, which ultimately plays into your performance.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's my 2 cents.
One other thing, like one terrible habit I had in high school was skipping classes and then learning the material at home. Man, that shit catches up to you, especially in university when Rafi said like there's a lot more content. Like there's a lot more content, and it's not content that you have to know. It's content that you have to understand, you know? Especially like the type of exams that like university gives you versus high school.
Yeah.
So don't skip if you can attend. Please do attend.
Yeah.
Make sure you, like if you miss a lecture, bro, get on that. Even if you don't miss a lecture, go home and review it. I didn't do any of that, so learn from my mistakes. Make sure if you learn something, the day you learn it, you go home and you read it and practice a lot.
I think one of the things that the habits that I tried to develop that helped me a lot was that don't study a lot every day, but do something. So keep some time, go over lecture notes, do something. Don't just like forget about it. And then the day before the test, you're cramming everything. That way, like it'll be a lot easier for like retention of memory and stuff like that. And it'll also help your understanding, so you won't forget it on the test. So my advice is to do something every day. Read 1 page or 10 pages, but just do something.
And I think this is also like one thing I want to add for is at least for engineering, because that's all I can speak to. A straight mark on a midterm is okay. Like it's okay to fail a midterm.
True.
And if you come from like you're like a high school where you're like an overachiever or you've gotten like 90s and whatnot, like that can crush your confidence. And honestly, like it might haunt you for like a week or two and stress you out. But be confident in your like abilities, understand why you did bad, and fix the mistake. It's okay to do bad for now, as long as you think big picture and learn from your mistakes. So yeah, just be confident in yourself. You will struggle.
Yeah.
Like you will struggle. I think almost everybody who goes to first year uni struggles. Nobody goes from 90s to high school, 90s in high school to 90s in uni, unless you're actually like a decent, freaking amazing student. So yeah, it's okay. It's okay to do bad, man. You can't have everything your way. Just be patient and work hard, and it will work out for you.
Yeah, learning from your mistakes is a good point. And I think that's the case for like high school as well, obviously. But the one thing to consider is that for most courses in university, you have less assessments than you would in high school. So at least when I was in high school, we had like unit tests every 2 weeks, right? And then we'd have like mini tests, or I can't remember what they were called anymore. We'd have multiple assessments throughout. So that was, it was a lot easier to like bounce back from certain mistakes or from certain, failures. I think in university it's not as easy, but that's where it becomes very important to learn from your mistakes and to have like resilience, and to be able to, really get back on track as soon as you can.
Also, I just want to say, like, maybe this is true for Eng, but chances are you likely won't fail a midterm. Like, it's not like a guaranteed thing, right? I can't speak for, like, engineers, but, like, in my experience, most of the averages in our class were somewhere, like mid-60s to low 70s. So, like, you can tell, like, the average doesn't fail. Again, can't speak for engineering.
Yeah, I guess it's a very like experience-based thing, situation, program, maybe specific, but yeah, like don't be afraid to do bad. It might happen. There's a good chance it'll happen. If it's not on a midterm, it might be something else.
Yeah, it could be an assignment. Even like sometimes the prof will tell you you're doing the assignment right.
Yeah, or even an exam, right? So learning from those mistakes is very important.
Yeah.
One point that I think you guys all touched upon was the fact that when you transition from high school to university, there's a lot more freedom. So your course schedule is not the same as in high school. You have the ability to skip classes, and for the most part, professors won't notice. You can choose to do your work or not, right? You don't have necessarily dedicated homework every day. So there's a lot more freedom, which is a very good thing because, as Faizan mentioned, it gives you time to spend in things that you enjoy. If it's soccer, if it's a club or something like that, right? You can explore your options, do different things. But it's very important to not let that pile up. It's very important to not, get lost in all that freedom and all that time that you have. So planning your day, really making sure you're on track with things is very important, at least in my experience.
Especially,
go ahead.
especially if you live alone, like off campus, and your parents aren't on your back to study anymore, you're gonna have to be like the only person pushing yourself to study. So discipline's a big thing.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing. I think your weekends are very, very important, because if you just use your weekend to coast and not actually catch up on work or get ahead or do whatever assignments that you have, it's really going to come and bite you, because your weekends is 48 hours of just you time. There's no additional material being piled on. So yes, use that time to kind of take care of yourself. If you want to watch an episode or two of a show that you like, fine, but don't just binge watch Netflix the entirety of Saturday.
Yeah, and one specific thing I want to add, like this is for specifically like Waterloo or for kids living off campus. Weekends, like Faizan said, will get eaten up if you go and visit your family every weekend, like I myself do or my friends do. And sometimes it's hard to go home and see your family after you haven't seen them all week, and then like force yourself to study or close yourself into a room and study. So you're gonna have to learn to manage your time wisely with that as well.
Yeah, and I guess managing your family's expectations as well, right? Yeah. And I actually wanted to add on to Faizan's point about weekends. So weekends, definitely, yes, maximize that time. But I would extend that to breaks in general. So you're going to have times where, again, you don't have classes or you don't have to study and you have maybe like a 3-hour gap. So, instead of, at least in my opinion, instead of spending that time maybe on YouTube, maybe, engage in something a bit more productive or something where you'll feel, more satisfaction. So if that's, a club activity, then go for it. Because a lot of times that kind of stuff is more interesting and gives you a better sense of reward than, watching a show. But that's just my experience. And obviously it's different for others. If you do have a 3-hour gap or something longer than that, I do recommend sleeping in that time. Because a lot of times, you're going to come home late, or maybe not a lot of times, but you could come home late, or you're busy and you have to stay up a bit longer than you really want to. So catching up on sleep is I think, very important. You guys touched upon this as well, but would you guys say that in your experience, the workload was harder in university?
I think, yes, it is harder, but in general, there is more work, because in high school, you're taking a maximum of 4 courses, or sometimes 3 if you're taking a spare,
right,
to jumping to 5 or maybe 6 courses, right?
There's no labs either.
Yeah, exactly. And in high school, it's just like doing your homework, and maybe your homework will get checked or whatever. And then in university, you have more lectures and more classes, and then you have more additional things for those classes. So some of your classes might have 3-hour labs bi-weekly, or some of them might have tutorials that you have assignments and all of those things to go to. So I think in general, it is more work. Is it harder? I don't think it's necessarily harder. I think it just requires you to put in more time and more effort, which again requires discipline and time management. And so, I think just compared to high school, you're going to need to put in a lot more time.
For engineering, at least, it's definitely harder, I think, just because you're no longer taking that one math course. You might be taking several math courses in a term. The physics is also a lot harder. Things are more specialized, so it requires a lot more knowledge and understanding. The other thing you have to consider though is, I don't know how it works for other programs, but you won't have a physics lecture every day. You'll have 2 a week.
Mm-hmm.
So you won't have more lectures per se, but the content's enough for a month, man. The lectures are pretty heavy in content. So especially given that you have labs, given that you have midterms and exams and then assignments, that's definitely a lot more work. That is harder work too. Exams are tougher in university, at least for me, than high school was, right? There's a lot more curveballs. So workload is definitely harder in my experience. And it's harder in first year just because you're not used to that. But then in second year, for engineering at least, it gets actually academically difficult, because it becomes challenging content to understand, as opposed to first year we're just adapting to general knowledge.
Yeah, I personally found second year harder than first year. I think it might have been because of the course content and the way the marking scheme was for each course. But definitely the content is a lot more. And if your work ethic is not good, that can translate into it being more hard. And I think certain things that you do to improve your work ethic, or just your understanding of concepts, for example, being good at taking notes, right? There is a way of taking notes that might be better for you compared to others. And that can help you study better. Some people aren't good at taking notes, Some people don't even take notes, right?
And it works
So-
for them sometimes, yeah.
And it shows in your marks. It does, right?
Yeah, I found first year to be harder as well, because as everyone mentioned, like the adjustment period is more difficult. And also, as someone who's went into business, like I didn't really take many business courses previously. So even though a lot of these concepts in hindsight aren't that hard to understand,
It's still difficult to
it's
adjust.
still difficult to adjust,
Yeah.
exactly. And then second year, I found that to be rather easy, personally, just because I had adjusted at that point.
Mm.
But something I also want to note is that the workload increases not in just course load. For some programs, there's a lot of stuff you're expected to do outside of your courses,
yeah.
like nursing and science programs. You may be expected to do hours at a hospital or
Studying for MCAT.
exactly studying for MCAT.
Yeah, no.
And then, like as a business student, for example, depending what you're trying to go for, sometimes when you're recruiting for different jobs, that like the recruitment process itself can take a lot of preparation, and that can be really time consuming. So
Yeah, on that note, for recruitment, at least in like internship programs, any internship program, like getting a resume critique, networking, getting like looking for jobs, interviewing for jobs, applying for jobs, that's all time consuming stuff. And that's, for some people, that could be challenging, like prepping for an interview.
Stressful as well.
Yeah. Especially if you have like technical interviews where like they're going to test you on something or test you on knowledge and stuff. That's also difficult to study for. So there's definitely a lot more like different set of challenges, completely different set of challenges that are harder in my experience at least.
Yeah, actually, adding on to what Khalid just mentioned, I think in high school your focus is purely on grades, whereas in university your time is divided into a lot of different things. So if like in business at least, your end goal is getting a job, but in order to get a job, sometimes you need good grades, and you'll have some weeks where you have to dedicate 10 to 15 hours to networking sessions or going to like info sessions or whatever it may be. And then you also have classes going on or whatever. And sometimes you might have interviews that actually conflict with your classes. So you got to choose like what's more important to you. Is it getting a good grade? Is it getting a job? Is it preparing for the technical interviews? So you have a lot more on your plate. And that's not to mention your own mental health and your extracurriculars and all of those things. So I think that transition's a bit hard. It's just kind of managing all of these different expectations, because in high school, you're basically chilling. You have grades to worry about and that's it. And obviously like whatever like ECs you're doing, but you don't have to worry about getting a job, or you don't have to worry about like prepping for interviews or like any of those things. So those are important depending on the program, at least in business and engineering. That's a pretty common thing.
Yeah, I remember I literally had an interview literally right before my exam. So like you'd go in there, go to the interview, get bodied, and then go to the exam and get bodied.
In a suit.
Yeah, and literally in a suit, you look stupid as hell, just getting wrecked.
Exactly.
But you gotta. This is what you have to. This is part of growing up.
Yeah.
Like this is life. So you gotta do what you gotta do, man.
I just want to say we're not saying this to worry you guys. It is harder, but there are ways around it, and people have done well, and you can do well as well.
Yeah.
And another thing to say is that the general trend in most universities is that as you go into upper years, the courses will become, the class size will become smaller, and courses will become more specific. And because of that, right, you can have more friends, for example.
You can have more friends, and especially if the class is smaller, you can interact with people more.
Yeah, and like you can have more of a one-on-one interaction with the professor, for example, and that makes it like for me personally, was a better environment to study and learn.
For sure, especially if you're like with the same group of kids throughout like this your term or whatever, like taking the same courses, even it can help a lot. Just studying from each other.
But if you skip classes, the prof will know. That's
True.
the downside.
Yeah, that is true as well.
That's also true.
I don't think
just,
they care, but
to add, there's actually some classes that are contribution based, so your attendance is graded. So that's a good thing, because like free marks, right? Like I have some courses that are like 25-30% contribution. So it's nice. You just got to show up and talk. That's how a lot of tutorials are too, actually. But the downside is that like if you have other things on your plate, or if you just want to go to a soccer game, like you're gonna lose marks literally for not showing up.
If a prof knows you and you don't show up and they tell you why weren't you here?
Yeah.
What are you gonna do?
Yeah. So I guess to sum it up, like the content is more. I think we can all agree on that. It's a different set of challenges. It could be harder for some kids. Some kids can be well versed when it comes to those challenges, but just push through it.
And just like another random tip, like maybe second year, like the content does get harder, but also you kind of get accustomed to reaching out to upper years and your peers for study resources. Like there's a lot of courses where, for instance, you can get past notes, test banks, PDFs of textbooks, by the way, so you don't always have to buy the hard copy. So sometimes reaching out to upper years and your peers for those kind of materials really saves you time on studying.
Yeah.
I really recommend you do that. Yeah.
I think like another thing that I didn't really know or wasn't aware of is that the way you study has to be different.
Yeah.
Like sometimes people will say, yo, this prof likes to ask these specific kind of questions.
Yeah.
And one of those questions will be worth like 20 marks on like an 80-mark exam, you know? As opposed to like a unit test where it's like out of 25 and each question is like 4 marks or whatever. Yeah. Mistakes can literally cost you like a lot of an exam, like a big part of it. So the way you study matters. Yeah.
Yeah, I think what Hassan mentioned about, having friends that are older than you will pay off like crazy.
Yeah.
Because whether it be giving you tips on how to study or giving you resources on all of those things, it's just super, super helpful. And they've gone through the thing that you're going through. So if you ever just want to talk to someone or need someone to mentor you, upper year students are great resources.
Yeah.
I think a lot of students also struggle to find upper year students. And at least in my experience, clubs were very helpful for that.
Yeah.
Because you get to meet different kinds of people that are either younger or older, and that gives you the chance to interact with others and get information, give information.
Yeah.
And I think it's very beneficial. I think Khalid mentioned a good point as well, which was linked to the idea of studying smarter, not necessarily harder. So you don't have to spend 3 hours studying. I mean, maybe you do, but you don't have to. And maybe you want to find a different way or a more efficient way of studying. Maybe you want to study with people. Maybe you don't. Maybe you know that someone's notes are going to be better than yours, so you want to collaborate with them. Collaborate is a very good term. Collaborate is a very good term. But yeah, so you want to consider different factors. You want to look into those things because it's not necessarily the same as high school, and there are like differences in how the assessments are and just the kind of knowledge that you want to have. I think also, at least for a lot of people, your mindset shifts in university from just doing well for the course, and you actually want to learn because like later on you want to actually apply this knowledge that you get if it is what you want to do. So what you're trying to gain from the course is also a bit different. So again, studying is going to be very different because maybe you're going to focus on retaining that information as opposed to just like regurgitating it for that one test that you have tomorrow in 6 hours, right?
Yeah, and one thing, dude, like you're in high school, you can do well if you do everything alone. Like it's totally possible to do all your essays alone, do all your assignments alone, and study alone. But that might not be the case at university.
Don't be shy to ask for help. You need constructive criticism on your assessments and on your writing because that's going to help you learn from your mistakes.
Yeah.
And another thing that you could do is go to office hours. Professors have office hours, right? And they give hints usually. People don't do that. Sometimes when I go to office hours, it's only me and the professor sitting there for like an hour the whole time. Sometimes only like 5 or 6 people, whereas it's open to everyone. And it's good to get to know your teacher. It's a good networking opportunity. Maybe you can get some research positions with them, stuff like that. So they'll get to know you, and you'll do better in the course as well.
Yeah.
So office hours are definitely some way to get help.
I 100% agree with what Rafi said. Yeah. Networking, you're totally right. When I was in first year, I used to go to my business prof's office hours a lot because I didn't take any business courses and I was super lost all the time. And she knew someone at TD and they were looking for like a student employment opportunity, and she referred me. And I think they were looking for like third-year students. I didn't get the job, which sucks. But anyways, what I'm saying is like
the opportunity is there.
Yeah, the opportunity is there, and like
that was so anticlimactic.
I know.
No, but I'm saying that the opportunity arose where you were able to have this great relationship, and I'm still in touch with her today. And so yeah, like that's definitely a relationship that you want to build on because they're going to be helpful resources for you going forward. Like chances are it's like Scantron or just your student number if it's an essay-based course. So you're not going to be favored.
I mean, they can help your marks on like clearing any misunderstandings or confusions you might have on the content.
Yeah.
Regrading too. Like if you just go to them and just be like, man, you're being kind of like
unfair.
Yeah.
So sometimes when TAs mark, they can be harsh.
True.
Right? And if you look at the marking scheme or look at your test and you believe that it's unfair, you go to the prof and they'll remark it.
Yeah, because his TAs are the ones marking. So if you go to a prof and be like, man, this TA is bugging, he might actually be like...
So like it's happened to me before where like my mark was 10% lower than it should have been because the TA didn't add up correctly. And I found the mistake, right? And I'm glad I did. If I didn't, then my mark would have been a lot lower.
Yeah. And also like, because the lecture sizes are so much larger than your high school class in like the first and second year of uni, asking questions might be difficult for some kids.
Oh yeah.
So office hours helps. If you can't go to office hours, email, man. Like
Yeah, book
just
appointments.
Email a TA even.
Yeah. I do want to mention one thing which you guys talked about later, which was getting help from other people. So this wasn't true in my experience, but I know of a friend or friends in programs where you need to have a trusted circle of friends to get resources from, because sometimes if it's like very competitive or like there's cutoffs in first year where some people might get like eliminated from the program, some people might actually feed you resources that are not helpful or actually wrong resources. So if you ask for like notes or something like that, they'll like purposely make it wrong and send it to you. So
That's crazy.
do keep in mind that it's important to have a trusted group of friends, and obviously don't do that to other people. Like don't be like
Snake.
don't be Snake. Don't be that guy. So yeah, having a trusted group of friends is important.
And don't blindly follow other people.
Yeah.
Right. Use your own intellect and see whether what you're getting is credible or not.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, fact check it with the prof during office
and that
hours.
goes with anything in life, not just school.
Yeah.
That's insane, man. That's a whole different cup of tea. We should
Yeah.
I never had that
I've
experience
had-
in my program,
Yeah.
but I know definitely from friends that
Yeah.
it definitely happens.
But don't think like you'll get snaked on a regular. Like it's not.
Yeah,
a
yeah,
common
yeah.
thing. Yeah.
Okay, so one thing you guys touched upon was living on campus versus off, and we heard different opinions. Do we want to talk about that a bit more? So, any thoughts?
I went to Western, so because it was too far. It was like a 2-hour drive one way. I couldn't commute, so I ended up living off campus. I didn't actually live on residence. I know I there's certain universities like Western and Laurier which have a like a stereotype of being party schools. So I can't really speak to the party environment at residence, but I can share with you what I've heard. So I have heard at certain residences, because there were like 4 or 5 different ones. Some of them were more party-like, and obviously during times like Halloween and homecoming or
Patrick's
whatever.
Day.
Yeah, St. Patty's Day. Like
Oh.
Weston's known for that. It's pretty iconic. So then you would tend to make it would get a lot louder. People would be drinking and partying, whatever. So I lived in an apartment with a couple guys who were kind of like me, like they didn't like drink or anything like that. But there were people in our building actually who, you would hear like if you're going to the elevator to do your laundry or whatever, you hear like blasting music, people like just having a good time. So that is a thing, like obviously if you're living on residence. So if you're not the type to indulge in like drinking and partying or whatever, it might be better to live off campus. Plus, not to mention it's a lot cheaper. So that's obviously a factor. Speaking of finances, that is going to be something you have to consider, especially given like OSAP cuts and all that. Like grant funding is like half now or is much lower. You have to consider if living off campus or away from home is financially feasible for you, especially because certain programs are a lot more expensive. So it can range anywhere from like 7 to like 30,000. So depending on how much your program tuition is and how much living expenses are, that is something you definitely have to consider. Yeah, what else? I enjoyed it, to be honest, because of the type of person I am. I like to have control over my time. And I think someone else mentioned earlier about going back home. Sometimes you get distracted from your family members because just little things like, if you're studying and your mom's like, hey, can you come vacuum? Like, you don't really have that when you're living away from home. So, which is something I enjoyed because I have control over my entire schedule. But obviously in the beginning it was very lonely because you've been living with your parents for like 18, 19, 20 years and it's a complete shift. So it does suck in the beginning, but I enjoyed it at the end just because it kind of fed into my personality of having control as well as being able to do things at my own schedule. So like if it's 12 midnight, I can go to the gym if I want. Like I don't have to rely on my dad to drop me off. Or if it's if I need to go to the library or whatever, like I don't have to commute an hour to go to the library during exam time. I can just walk 20 minutes. So there are definitely pros and cons. So I think you have to evaluate them yourselves and make a decision based off what's best for you and your family.
I think I want to start at the very beginning, just convincing your parents why you have to live alone. That's a very difficult thing. It was very difficult convincing my family why I have to live alone in Waterloo. So for me, one, convincing my family that living alone was like okay, it wasn't bad. I'm not like abandoning the family. The other thing you have to consider is financing. A lot of kids, because of the nature of university, don't work during university, which means your parents are gonna either have to like cover that cost, or your co-op is gonna have to cover that cost, or OSAC or whatever. So you have to plan for that. And then sometimes you have to live alone, especially if you're in engineering and you have like more than a 1 hour commute one way. It's gonna be difficult, like wasting 3 hours of your day after a 9 to 5 day of classes, which is every engineering schedule in the first and second years of university, and then coming home and studying and then sleeping and then waking up early and repeating that cycle. And then after that, there's the factors like roommates, and then there's also discipline. So I want to touch on roommates first. Having friends to live with, or people who you are like just within your comfort zone. So for example, I come from like a culture and a religion where like I don't drink or party much, just for like traditional reasons or religious
Wait, people
religious
don't party
reasons.
at Waterloo?
No, let me tell you something. I came home from the library once and just listen, man. And I walked in and I swear to God, I was like baffled. There was a whole ass party like in the apartment, and like the stuff you see in the movies, man, just like people playing beer pong and shirtless people like smoking weed and everything. And I'm like, how am I supposed to study my like physics in this room, And you go in this room and you put in headphones and all you hear in the background is shots, and it's just, man, live with people you're comfortable with. I also made that mistake of living with kids who just stay in the room and game and like don't talk to people much, and that's something I'm not comfortable with. So it was very lonely, Make sure your roommates are people within your comfort zone, people you're okay with, and people you can actually have a social life with. And the other aspect is discipline. Discipline is very important because I said I had like a terrible work ethic. A lot of what I did in high school, apart from like I want to do good in school and all that, I also did for my parents. That was a big motivation. And then my parents sort of stopped pushing me the minute I got into like a decent school with like a decent program, and they stopped caring. That's it. So I stopped caring, and that was a big mistake. And when you don't have people like parents telling you, why are you watching Netflix, why aren't you studying, or why are you playing soccer, why aren't you studying, you sort of fall into those bad habits. So that was a very big thing as well. I'm trying to rectify that now, like by like living with people in my program or living with people who like study a lot or force me to be like more motivated about my career and whatnot. So those two aspects I struggled with. Pros, it's amazing. It's amazing living alone and not having to answer to anybody. Doing your own groceries, coming whenever, leaving whenever, stuff like that. Like I have a younger sibling and an older sibling, and whenever all three of us are in the same house, it gets very chaotic. So just having a more laid back, quiet setting to just chill in was very, very amazing, with all due respect to my parents. So yeah, man, like pros and cons, pick your roommates, pick your environment. Sometimes you have to live alone, and it's okay to live alone. But if you are going to live alone, you have to be mature enough to make decisions on your own and face the consequences on your own.
I just want to say two things. When we say living alone, we don't mean like literally alone. We mean like away from home and living with like a few roommates. You can obviously live alone, but I wouldn't recommend that. It gets very lonely. And another thing that Khalid mentioned that was a great point was that your roommates are actually your first form of peer pressure, for good or for bad. Those people, because you're like literally living with them, you're going to interact with them. Yeah, they're going to be your first form of peer pressure.
Yeah.
So choose them wisely, depending on whatever your preferences are.
Yeah, for sure. Like you'd much rather have someone who motivates you to study together or apply for jobs together and whatnot.
Yeah, and like for those that don't actually resonate, you guys commute to school. So like if you go to like U of T in York, usually you commute. Like you don't have to think about it like the whole commute is a wasted time, because if you're sitting on the bus for like 40 minutes, an hour, like you can use that time to be productive. You can work on the bus.
Sleep.
So exactly, sleep, catch up on sleep. So it's not always wasted time when it comes to commute, but still you have to make sure to schedule that into your day, because it does take up time, and it is kind of tiring commuting like to universities that are far away. So just make sure to keep that in mind.
I remember once I had like a co-op in Toronto, and I took the subway for the first time, and dude, it was like the most miserable days of my life. Like I'd bus to Square One, and then bus to the subway, like a packed ass bus, and you have to stand because you can't sit. And then you get on the subway, and it's like rats and crackheads, bro. And you have to stand in that too. And that, dude, like I honestly can't imagine having to do that every single day, bro. So I respect a lot the kids who commute, but if you can live alone, there's definitely a pro. Like you do save that time and energy.
If it's financially feasible.
Yeah.
One thing about living alone is I hear, and correct me if I'm wrong for those of you who are, that you have to do very early on. So when picking like your roommates, picking where you're going to live, finding apartments and all that, it's something you want to do, very early on. Do you guys want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'll start with that. For me, like I had a couple kids who were going into like uni from my school, and so we just sort of like planned something. I didn't end up living with them for other reasons, but like the minute we all got into acceptances, that's when we started. Try to start like the term before the term you study. So if you have a study term in the fall, look for an apartment in the summer, and usually before the middle of the term beforehand, because that's when all other kids start looking and everything starts getting booked up. Ideally, look for something closer to campus, and make sure to go see the place if you can, or have someone there see it and send you pictures. Because like
recordings even better.
And recordings. Because sometimes, dude, like we went to this basement once, like my very first time living off campus, and this lady was like a sweet lady. She's like, oh yeah, it's nice, and look at the ceiling, it's so healthy and it's high and you can breathe. But she didn't tell us about like the other stuff, and the other stuff was literally earwigs falling like from the ceiling, like while studying, just on my laptop, Or dude, I swear to God, I was in the washroom once, and the biggest spider I have ever seen in my life. And I'm very like anti-bugs. I hate bugs, and that shit just pulled up. I just packed up my things and left, man. I'm like, I'm going to campus. I don't need this. And I crashed at my friend's place for like a week or two. I swear. So like,
you were here for 4 months.
Yeah, I was there for 4 months, but dude, I would have much rather slept in a dungeon. Like it was terrible. Man, go see the place if you can, get it early, and try to haggle for the price, try to bargain for the price.
Yeah, I think it's tough to kind of get it early because honestly, like December, January, like I'm looking for a new place just to go closer to campus a little bit. And right now is the time you guys are applying to university. You don't even know where your offers are going to come from. Yeah. So it is very, very challenging. I think in your situation, the ideal thing would be to find people from your school or your friends, like from other schools or whatever, who are going to the same place, and then look for it with them. If you can't, then I think there's certain trade-offs have to be made. Like you might not be able to have your ideal roommates, just because the people who are looking closer to April and May are those people who likely are also looking for a new place, or like their roommates just moved out or whatever. So it's very hard. Like there's no like answer I can give you, but as soon as you know you're going to a particular program, or as soon as you know that you and your friends have accepted the same sort of university or the same area, then start looking immediately, because it is hard, especially in first year. You have a bit more flexibility after first year, so you might have to take an L the first year, just depending on like when you get your acceptance, the type of roommates you're gonna have, whatever. Most likely, a lot of you are gonna start looking in May, and so then you kind of have to pick your battles, right? If you want a good place, maybe you won't find good roommates, or if you find a good roommate, might be really far from your campus. You might have to take another 30 or 40-minute bus ride to get to campus.
Defeats the purpose sometimes. It
depends
exactly on what you want to look for.
Yeah, and typically they're like 8 to 12 month leases, so you're committed. So like Khalid, his situation was different, in which he was kind of bouncing around 4 months to 4 months, but typically you're there 8 to 12 months. Yeah. So it is hard in first year, in grade 12. So you just gotta apply as early as you can.
Join housing groups on Facebook.
Oh yeah,
those are big help.
Yeah.
And if you know any upper years in there, ask them if they're looking for roommates.
Yeah.
Because that could also help a lot.
Yeah.
And this is for Waterloo specifically. Like depending on your co-op program, sometimes you do co-op in the middle of the year, so you have to look for like a 4-month lease, or like an 8-month non-consecutive lease, stuff like that. So the minute you figure out what you're doing and how you're gonna live there and whatnot, get started, because there's a lot to consider.
Oh, okay. Also, you gotta make sure that your roommates are also committed to the same leasing terms as you. So this happened with me. Me and one of my roommates, we were students. So naturally we were going to stay from September to April. But the third guy, he wasn't a student. He was actually a resident, like a med school resident. So what ended up happening was his thing just got moved. Like he was in, I think, London, Windsor area for a while. And then he got moved to Hamilton. And so in the middle of the year, he just cut. Like he just dipped. He gave his 2-month notice and he just left. And so what happened was, I had midterm season at the time, and I had a couple weeks to try to fill in that slot for that roommate, but I couldn't, just because, I had to try, because everyone already has roommates by that point. All the students are gone, right? You have exam season going on, right? And if you don't find someone, then you and the other guy are liable to pay that fees because the management doesn't care about a particular room. They care about paying for the entire apartment. So if your apartment costs $1,500, either someone else pays that $500 or you two have to pay that $250 together. And so that kind of sucks. So try to get students who have the same sort of schedule in terms of like months that they're going to be at university as you. And also make sure that they sign something which is like
Legally binding.
Yeah, legally binding from the management side because our lease had ended. We're on a month to month, so that guy was able to do it. But if we had signed a 12-month lease, then he would still have to pay for his thing, which kind of sucks. But yeah, these things you got to consider.
Try to, like, ideally when you sign your contract or your lease, try to make it like per room. So you are only responsible for your room. That's your lease, not by apartment.
Right. So a lot of research to be done, talking to others just to get those kind of finicky details figured out. Yeah. So Hassan talked a little bit about commuting, and you mentioned that even if you are on a bus ride for a very long time, it's not necessarily lost time. Do we have anything else we want to talk about from the commuting side?
Yeah, obviously make sure like you get your student accounts and your student fares. Some people don't even realize that you can get lower fares because you're a student and they end up paying the full fare when you could save a lot of money as a student. So I recommend you look into that. I would always recommend to, if you have to catch a bus, just to go early. Like, I think I was in the habit of always going last second, and so I missed a lot of buses, which obviously, because if you miss a bus, you're late to lecture. Just make sure, 5 minutes is not going to make a difference. Just go out a little early and catch your bus on time, and just reduces the stress of the day. But yeah, I mean, just, you can be productive with your commutes, as I mentioned earlier.
Yeah, personally, I drive to school sometimes. One thing to keep in mind is traffic timings. It can be very difficult to drive in that time. Also looking for parking because, a lot of times parking isn't free at university. So you either have to get like a sort of pass, which is also very expensive, or you just kind of pay day to day, or you can look for parking near campus. So like on streets nearby or certain plazas, and just make sure that, you're not breaching any rules or anything and you're not getting parking tickets. But yeah, I found those two to be things that I didn't really think about until I started driving and started, parking, realizing I was paying too much.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, like parking is so expensive, honestly. Like the cheapest parking, like the parking garage attached to my school, whatever, is like $20 for like 5 hours or something. So like I would honestly avoid parking on campus, at least if you go to York. Like, so yeah, that's pretty much it.
Wait, what about parking passes?
With parking passes, oh yeah, you can get parking passes. I mean, those are also quite expensive, but obviously if you go every single day, it can be a good saving for you.
Or a handicap permit.
Or like a handicap Yeah.
I think there are definitely ways around like the rules and the way to get passes. Like I know at UTM, you can sometimes get a job on campus, and then using that, you can get a nice permit. That's a lot cheaper, and you can pay. I think usually it's like 20% of the actual price for the whole year because you have a job on campus, and also you can also get a job in the residence where the university will pay for your room and everything. And usually the job is more of a mentorship role. So you take a few students and like usually in the same program, taking the same courses that you have taken, and you can mentor them. And that way you can also have a place to live at school as well.
You can also find like parking spots that aren't on campus but are close. So there's options for sure.
Yeah, because I personally, my commute's like 5-10 minutes by bus.
That's very
privileged. I'm pretty privileged, yes.
Damn, all that time?
Yeah, what do you do during your commute? Do you study?
No, not at all.
Well,
I have 10 a.m. classes that I leave my house at 9:50 and I still get there in time. But it comes with its own set of pros and cons for sure. Pros being you can leave home like really late and still get there on time. You can also go home in between classes, just sleep, eat. You don't have to buy food on campus. You can eat at home, which is pretty nice. But also, it can also make you pretty lazy when you have when you're very close to home. Again, going home to sleep in between can also make you lazy, like I said.
Okay, so one of the questions we get a lot is how to go about writing your supplementary application. So a lot of programs have like additional applications instead of just the OUAC thing. So the question that we get a lot is how to make it stand out. And this is a very like program specific thing, but do you guys want to talk about your experiences?
Yeah, for sure. So U of T and Waterloo both had an extra supplementary application, and they had a video interview process. McMaster just had a video interview, and then I think Ryerson and York didn't have anything.
And that was in your year, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I don't know how things have changed now. This was like in 2017. So for Waterloo and for U of T, the interview process cannot hurt you. It can only benefit you. And the questions aren't questions like, those like quirky type questions. It's like, here's a problem. How would you solve it? So an example is like you're now the mayor of Hamilton and you want to establish more electric charging stations around the city. What 3 questions would you ask to extract information to help you achieve that goal, right? And you've got like 2-3 minutes to do that, and you can't repeat questions. That's a different type of interview, and that's equally as important as the regular sub-application. Sub-application is arguably the most important part of your application, and that's the part where you talk about your extracurricular activities and like your leadership involvement, community involvement. For U of T, it was like a bunch of like paragraphs. Tell me what clubs you were enrolled in. What did you do? What role did you play? What problems did you solve? And then you're going to have to always give a reference, like such and such teacher was my supervisor. For Waterloo, it's it's like a list. It'll list all your activities that you did. So the sub-apps are crucial because you can have a lower mark than somebody else. So I know kids who got into the same program I did with like an average 4% lower than mine, but their sub-app was worth it. Because the entire point of like engineering, at least, we want leaders who are gonna solve issues in the community and help make the community a better place. And so you want people who already do that in high school, because then you fit into their proposed model at university, right? And if you have the discipline and the work ethic and the initiative to do that in university, in high school, then you're going to thrive in university. So writing the sub-app is extremely crucial. You want to highlight how involved you were in the community. Try to be involved in initiatives that are like humanitarian. I think that's also a great thing to have on your application. You're not just someone who focuses on career only. And get it edited by your teachers, get it edited by your peers, rehearse your interviews beforehand. Like, I think some of these questions are like, you can expect some of the stuff like, oh, so why did you choose U of T engineering? Or Waterloo's going to ask you, what did you hear about our co-op program? That's like a standard question. So maybe you rehearse those and start the sub-app ASAP. Please, like the minute it's available, start that ASAP. Because there's going to be other universities have like essays on essays to write and why you were born to be an engineer. And some of these questions you never had to think of. So you have to really understand why you want to do this program and put that into words.
Yeah, I just want to say that everything Khalid mentioned is great. Some tips for if you're doing it right now, I'd say like 2 or 3. Number 1, contact your references early, because you're going to need those references for chances are for 5, 6, maybe like whatever many sub-apps you need. And chances are a lot of students are actually contacting them. So getting it out of the way early and getting their confirmation, having their details is super, super important. Another thing I want to mention is you can't focus on the things that you're going to be doing. You have to focus on things you have already done. So let's say you're part of a club that intends to, in May, go and feed homeless people. That's great. But if you're trying to sell yourself, as an admissions committee, I don't care about what you're going to do. I want to know what you have done and what results you have achieved, which will be in line with the program I'm trying to recruit you for. So focus on the things you have done. So that's number 2. And number 3, I'd say this is just my opinion. Like, this isn't a thing. And I didn't even think of this when I was writing supplementary applications, but going through like interview processes and cover letters for internships and whatnot, there is a structure called the CAR structure. So it stands for context, action, result. I would recommend thinking about that just because it works well in like behavioral settings, is useful for interviews, whatever. So focus about 20% of your time talking about the context and what the club is or whatever, about 60% of the time talking about your action. So what you specifically did for the club to achieve what they did and what value did you specifically bring. So for, let's say you're the treasurer, like what did you do that helped either increase revenue, increase profitability, or lower costs, something like that. And then the 20% at the end would be the results of what you actually achieved. So again, if you're the treasurer, you could say, oh, we fundraised like X amount of thousands of dollars, right? Yeah. And the previous year, it was only this much. So like my involvement helped improve it by this much amount. And maybe then in the results section, you can talk, maybe give like a one-liner of what you're going to be doing next, but focus on what you have done and try to maybe use a framework. Again, I'm talking more from a cover letter interview standpoint. So just think about it.
And be honest in your answers. one of the questions Waterloo actually asks, one of the ones I got was, have you ever cheated before? And if so, why? And would you do it again? Your immediate reaction would be like, oh, I don't cheat, I'm a model student. But if you're actually like honest, they can really appreciate like, yeah, I cheated once because I had to focus on whatever, I really needed marks and I regret my mistake and whatnot. And that makes you different just because you're being upfront and honest and you're answering the question in a way that most kids wouldn't. And to add on to Faizan's point, yeah, ideally you want to be involved in clubs in high school in general. Don't just get involved in grade 12 just because you want to get into university. But if you haven't at all been involved and like grade 12 is right around the corner, or if you already started grade 12, it's never too late to just join a club. Like join a club, man. Go out there, volunteer, do something so you can say you did it instead of saying,
even if
it's
it's
too
sports
late.
or whatever.
Yeah, even if it's sports. Literally, if you're like on intramurals, you know, say yeah, I played intramurals. I was like,
or if you're the captain or something like that.
Yeah, definitely. I think Khaled's point about honesty was very good. Honesty and being genuine, I think, are very important, especially when it comes to interviews or applications that are a bit longer. So if it's like an essay that you have to write or something, because not only does it make it easier for you to actually talk because you don't have to come up with a story, you know, you could just talk about yourself. Admissions committees can often tell if you're exaggerating or stretching the facts, or you're not really being yourself.
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes we underestimate their ability to to catch that. So being genuine is very, very important.
Like, I think the mistake that a lot of us, or I made as well, and some of my friends make, is we assume there's a specific answer these guys want.
Yes.
Like, we're looking for a specific student, but that's not necessarily the case. And I know this is especially true when it comes to like applying to certain like med schools or whatnot. And there's no right or wrong answers. Just be yourself and be honest.
But I think one thing that can guide you is like sometimes universities have like a set of like values that they want their students to portray. And if you're answering a question for that university and you look at those values and you include that in your answer, it can increase your chances because it'll be a better fit for that program, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can usually find that stuff on like the website if it's program specific, program website.
Yeah.
Or you know, talking to upper years, that's also very useful just to get that idea. So you can frame your answers in that way, but you don't want to again exaggerate certain whatever aspects of your application. So you guys talked a bit about certain things that students in grade 10, 11 can kind of focus on before in grade 12. So let's just repeat some of those points and maybe expand upon them a little bit. What would be things that you would tell students who are not in grade 12 yet, but are getting closer? And what are things that they could do or change or improve to help improve their chances of admission?
Just get involved in clubs, live your life. If you're a student, have fun, learn, work on your habits, find your passions if you can. And don't worry about marks right now. You don't need them. No one's going to ask you for them until you're in grade 12 and 11.
Except your parents.
Except your parents.
Yeah, I think it's very important to, as you mentioned, find your passion and try to do things that allow you to use that passion and channel it into something bigger. So whether that be clubs in school or whether it be like doing something outside of school, right? A lot of opportunities for you to shadow other professionals. Maybe that is something that's too early to do in grade 10, but it's something you should definitely check out and do some research on to see what you can do in the future.
Actually, on that note, there's a really big hackathon that happens at Waterloo. Actually, I think it's the biggest in Canada, I want to say, but I don't know. It's called Hack the Six. And this is where like recruiters from Facebook, Bloomberg, and like Microsoft come in, and Google even. And these guys have a program specifically for high school students to come and compete with university students. So if you're really serious about this, you can get started early. Like you can get into this, like the tech industry at a young age without having to worry about marks. Get involved in the hackathons, start building your tech portfolio, your GitHub or whatever. And that will make you look amazing when applying to a competitive program like computer engineering at U of T, software engineering at Waterloo, or computer science at McMaster. Like it'll actually make you the model student. Like, this is the kid we want. This kid's already experienced in this field. He'll flourish in university if we give him the tools and assets, and he'll flourish in the industry when he graduates.
So really looking out for like external opportunities that may not be offered at your school.
Yes. Especially in tech, because they're like, it's already being a thing right now.
I was going to say, kind of adding on to your point, I think when you're not in grade 12, sort of in the earlier stages, is just put yourself out there. So even if you're not that interested in engineering or tech, maybe just even attending something like a hackathon could give you a much better understanding of what the tech industry or what the engineering industry is like. and exploring a lot of different courses, whether they be taking them in your high school if they're offered, or night school or summer school or whatever. I don't like the school I went to, there weren't a lot of business courses offered, and I made the mistake of not exploring that earlier on.
Yeah.
So I'd recommend that if your school doesn't offer certain courses,
Yeah.
then maybe going on summer school or whatever, or even just talking to people, or just online courses like LinkedIn Learning and like Coursera and all of that stuff. Yeah. So
Yeah.
exploring your options early on is definitely very important. And I'd say something I did in grade 11, which helped me, was there's this website called eInfo, which has all the information
Yeah.
about all the university programs and I think college
That's
programs
helpful.
and like the averages required or whatever. Keep in mind though, I think some of the averages and
Yeah.
things
So
required,
off.
they're outdated. So whatever it says, just add like an extra 4 or 5% to it.
Check the university
Um,
website. I mean,
Yeah, or the
don't just,
university,
like-
or just call them and ask. To be honest,
Yeah.
they'll be pretty candid with you.
Yeah.
But what I was gonna say was in grade 11 in the summer, what I did was I used to sometimes call my friends up who were interested in similar programs as I was, and just kind of on the phone with them for an hour, browse the website and start talking about like different programs, what the prerequisites are, and whatever. And so that helped me when choosing courses because if I was interested in sciences, I'd know, okay, I gotta really push for bio and chem,
Yeah.
and less so for like calculus, for example. So kind of browsing those websites is helpful earlier on to get a better idea.
I think you brought up like a couple things that I want to touch on. One, with regards to like figuring out the averages, this is specifically for Waterloo. There's a professor who every year releases like the graph.
Yeah.
I think his name was Bill Bishop or something.
Yeah.
And he literally releases a graph explaining like what your chances are of getting into Waterloo for a specific program with specific mark. And I remember when I was in grade 12, I was just fan paging like on that every single day. Like, oh, I have such and such average. What's my chance now? Oh, it's an 80. Or if I get like this at my unit test, it's going to be like an 81%, you know? So things like that, try to figure out your goal early on. It can help. I know we said like not everybody knows their goals, but it can definitely help knowing what you want to do. And summer school is a big, big thing. For example, say you finished grade 11, right? And now you have a nice summer break where you can honestly take 2 summer courses. You can take 2 summer courses if I'm not mistaken from grade 12. That can 1, decrease your workload. 2, you can take them until you want to drop them and they won't show on your transcript, but you just want to see what the course content is like. So for example, I didn't take biology in grade 11 because I was always like, engineering is the way to go. But then I was like, you know what? Maybe I missed out on something. So I took grade 11 biology in the summer and I was like, okay, I'm going to take grade 12 biology. I dropped that. That's besides the point. Like like the fact that I was able to even take it and drop it was only because I took it and I found out it's not something I wanted or I wouldn't be able to manage the course, so I just dropped it. So yeah, do get involved. Like in school, don't worry about marks, but get involved in school and get involved in the community, build a portfolio.
For sure.
I wanted to see something for grade 12 specifically, and it's just not to idealize spares. Though they're awesome and it kind of reduces your workload and everything, I think, I personally didn't take a spare, and that my reasoning at the time was that I wanted to keep like 4 courses just so I didn't change my work habits in a way which would then affect me in university. I know a lot of friends that did only take 3 courses and they did really well in university because they worked on their discipline and the time management and whatnot throughout the summer. But that was just my thought process, and also that also helps in keeping your options open. So let's say that there's a program that you apply to that isn't necessarily your primary field, but it might help fulfill some prerequisites that you need. So think about it. And also, let's say you do take a spare, you don't have to bum it. You can also take like online courses or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
So try to be a bit more productive with your spares if you want to take one. And it's not worth the hype, in my opinion. My opinion is a little biased because I didn't take one and it worked out for me. But yeah.
Yeah, I think one thing you guys mentioned was gaining exposure. So some people talked about, attending things outside of school. Some people talked about different courses to take, like different electives and whatnot. I'm a very big proponent for shadowing. I think it's a really good thing, especially if you could do it early on. Again, as Rafi mentioned, it's a bit difficult because, usually for shadowing, people will value those that are a bit older, have more experience. But if you can find those opportunities, they're very rewarding, very useful, and they can make the difference in your decision-making process.
Yeah. And one thing I want to add, but this is specifically for software. start programming the minute you get free time and you decide you want to go into software. It can literally make all the difference in the world between getting a job and not getting a job if you know a language. There are software courses offered at grade 11 and grade 12, but those are like nothing compared to software at university and nothing compared to software at work. So if you can start your own side projects or start learning programming on your own time, that'll be a big, big plus.
Awesome. So I think that's going to wrap up the podcast for today. Want to thank the guests for coming here. Really appreciate all the help and advice, and I hope it's really useful for all the students out there. Want to thank you guys for listening, and hopefully this was helpful to you guys. We tried to answer as many questions as we could, but if there's anything that we didn't mention or anything specific that we couldn't talk about, just send us an email or send us a message on our Instagram. And we do plan on having further podcasts, maybe more specific things. So let us know what you guys think. Give us some feedback and let us know if there are any specific topics, fields, or anything that you guys want us to really talk about. So really appreciate you guys listening, and we'll see you guys next time.